Hello, this is Ben Woodford here with the Modern Education Radio Hour on 90.1 KZSU Stanford. Hello, we are back. This is the show where we dig into everything from current research trends to far-out ideas concerning any topic even remotely related to education. I'm your host, Ben Woodford, here in the studio, and I'll be with you every Friday from 3 until 4 p.m. Here at the Modern Education Radio Hour, we bring cutting-edge ideas, philosophical discussions, insights from experts, and just about anything else you want to know. The goal is to help listeners interact with and understand learning in all types and forms. I have our guest in the not in the studio, but calling in for an interview today, Ronnie Shellist. And Ronnie will be joining us talking about informal and self-directed learning. I'm going to see if I can get Ronnie right here on the phone with us now. Ronnie, are you there? Can you hear me? All right. Let's try. There we go. Ronnie Shellist, are you there? Okay, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties there, so we're going to start out with a song from Ronnie, one of Ronnie's big influences in learning to play the blues. He is a blues musician, so we're going to start with one of his big influences, which is Lightning Hopkins. So we'll hear one song from Lightning Hopkins where we square away Ronnie's connection, and we'll be right back.
You know I was standing on 75 highway, pole lighting trying to flag a ride. You know I was standing on 75 highway, pole lighting trying to flag a ride. Yeah, it looked like all my friends seemed to know me. Oh, but it kept passing me on by.
Okay, we should be back on here with Ronnie Shellist. Ronnie, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. All right, there he is. Thanks for coming on, Ronnie. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come and talk with us here at Modern Education.
My pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Where are you calling us from today, Ronnie?
I'm in my hometown. I'm in Denver, Colorado.
Okay, and so you live and work primarily in Denver, Colorado, and tell us about what it is you do for the listeners.
Well, when I'm not traveling on the road, I am spending a good portion of my time right in front of my computer, doing interactive learning. You can hear my computer. I should probably shut it down. Doing interactive learning through such platforms as Skype and FaceTime with people all over the world, teaching them blues harmonica, and that's been my focus for quite a while, actually.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. So you've been doing, you're, I would say, an entrepreneur when it comes to music, as both a performer and a teacher and a traveling artist. And you started, was it in Austin, Texas?
Yeah, I mean, I ended up graduating from school in Austin at University of Texas out there, and I stuck around because I was just kind of digging the town. So I lived out there and started my music career the very early stages in the late 90s in Austin.
So I'm really interested in the early stages of learning something like this, because this has really become a career for you. And so I'm curious, for our listeners and for myself, what it's like getting your feet in the door, so to speak, with such a sort of close-knit group of blues musicians.
Wow. Well, I mean, to be honest, the reality of those circumstances were you know, taking what you could get, which at the time meant attending a lot of the shows that I would love to be a part of and maybe playing, but just being around the right guys and the right players, I think, was what I needed more than anything else, because quite frankly, in the early days, I wasn't really ready, but I did jump in head first. So I played with a couple different bands that were, I guess, you know, nice enough to have me on board and as a full-time member. And I got started playing what we called hill country music. So that's more Texas-influenced music, and it's folky, it's country, it's a little bit of blues, singer-songwriter. So, again, as an early student and performer, you kind of take what is in front of you and you make the most of it.
Yeah, as I'd say most people have to do when they're getting their foot in the door into a new industry. I heard you say something about not really being ready. And I think that's a common feeling for anyone trying to break into a new field. We feel like we don't necessarily know enough, or we don't fit in yet, or we don't have the time or the skin in the game, so to speak, to be able to really be a part of that scene yet. Did you have any of those feelings, or do you remember that being part of your needing the courage maybe to get your foot in the door?
Man, I was pretty... it was frightening, yes. To be direct, yeah, it was scary as hell because you are so new to it, but you're at the same time, what I had going for me is I was very excited and I was willing to be vulnerable and say, let's see what happens. This guy's willing to take me on his gig. Let's see what happens. You know what I mean? Like, I was willing to take those chances, even if it was just to sit in for a song, which was, to me, which was very scary, to just get in front of people and do something that was very personal, to me, to create music. So, but yeah, you just kind of have to, I was pretty brave. I got over that fear quickly when I saw that people responded to what I was doing.
Wow. Yeah, that's, I appreciate your honesty there. It's tough to admit those times when we're having a really difficult, or we're afraid. And I think it's sort of a universal thing for everybody trying to break into something new. We need to face those fears and take the opportunities that come our way. Do you remember your first gig or your first major time on stage?
The first one that comes to mind, which was probably pretty close to the first one, if not it, was a New Year's Eve gig. And it was kind of like a very small bar, just a duo, which is me and one other fellow playing. I remember that in Austin, Texas. Great singer-songwriter, if you want to check him out, by the name of Hugh Fidel, Fadal, Hugh Fidel, out of Austin, Texas. And so, yeah, I remember it. I remember drinking more than I should have at the time, and I remember indulging and being lost in the moment and having fun. But going back, what was interesting is somebody had video of what took place. So,
what a great learning opportunity!
Yeah, well, kind of. It was frightening and discouraging to watch some of what I was doing, but it was a huge lesson as to, hey, don't do these things. When you go back, there's a big lesson for anybody learning out there. And you're new to something, you must record yourself often so you can understand what you really sound like, and you can hear the nuances of what's going on while you're not distracted actually trying to do it. Make sense?
Absolutely, and I think that is a great learning opportunity in a lot of different fields. I know when I was a classroom teacher, they said one of the best things we could do is videotape ourselves so that we can see what's going on afterwards, because it's so hard to juggle everything that's happening, which I'm sure is similar as when you're on the stage.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're not doing that, you're missing out on probably half of the opportunity, the learning opportunity, because it's just too much to manage. Your brain is busy, focusing on new things. So to give it that extra challenge of trying to be aware of what's working, what's not, what do I really sound like, you need that recording. The recording it's such a great way to measure your evolution and your success, your goals, and to understand where you really are.
I couldn't agree more. And I appreciate you sharing that insight for our audience to think about. I'm thinking just in terms of learning in general, and maybe of students that you've had or yourself as a student. Is there qualities in a learner, like an effective learner, are things that you see commonly between the people who really take a hold of the teachings you give them versus just sort of do it as a hobby?
Well, the first thing is related to the fear topic, I think. Most of the people that come to me are doing it on a fairly serious level. Not that they're all out playing, but they're all taking it relatively serious. And the ones that are actually making the most progress, I think, are the folks that are willing to be vulnerable enough to face those fears, to say, here's what I sound like in front of this teacher who I've hired. I'm paying this guy to listen and evaluate, and he's a guy that's a professional level player, is going to hear me. I know it's intimidating at least the first couple times you get together to do a lesson, even online. So the people that are vulnerable, that just are willing to say, here's where I'm at, and they're willing to put that sound out there so we can make progress, that's step one. And the other thing is just sort of a general joy for what they're doing. If you have that, I think that's a huge ingredient we overlook in the learning process. For me, I was all over the map, but what I did right was I was constantly learning because I was constantly playing, and I was constantly playing because I was pulled in by the music I was trying to learn, the blues music and the blues harmonica that I was listening to. So it was always exciting. So if you're not excited about the process, start changing something. If you're learning something new and it's not really pulling you in, you've got to find a way to make it grab you, so to speak. So those are a couple things that come to mind right away.
Yeah, and I think those are very insightful, and I'm thinking about how they might transfer to other forms of learning. I mean, most of my teaching experience is through either tutoring or teaching in a classroom, and I've noticed that we don't get, as a classroom teacher, we don't usually get the same kind of enthusiasm that you're describing for the subjects. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about the disconnect there, why the students that you would see who are paying for your services, who are going out of their way to seek it out, somehow have a different level than students who are maybe forced to go to school.
No, that's a great point. I mean, I was a classroom teacher for years, by the way. I didn't mention that, but I was a Spanish teacher for many years, and the biggest challenge and difference is that you've got, whether it's 10, 15, 20, whatever it is, a classroom full of students to manage versus, me doing these one-on-one sessions. I've got one person to manage, and they're an adult typically. So True. Now you're managing, you put kids into the mix, right? And then, so I think one thing is getting on their level. For me, what helped a lot was literally taking the time to poll our students, and say, okay, you're in this class and this is the subject. Well, what are the ways you like to engage, and understanding how these students actually learn best, or how they perceive themselves as learners? Because once we appeal to a couple, you might find there's commonality. There's a third of the class that really enjoys whatever it is, creating a specific type of report, certain way to learn and process, while the other group literally can't do it that way. And so maybe you can diversify not the objective, but the way in which they get to their objectives, and their end products, because then you're kind of making it so personal to each student, even though they're really all learning the same topics. Yeah. I don't know if that's hard. That's probably a big challenge for a school teacher.
Yeah, it is both a challenge and a great suggestion. It sounds like a concept that I've heard of called an assessment menu, which is essentially giving people a way to choose the way they'd like their grade to be assessed. So some people might really revel in the presentation form of an assessment. Other people may really just prefer the paper and pencil test. So that's a nice, easy way to, I think, maybe start doing the thing that you described of giving kids and students. Go ahead.
I think these kids don't know, though, Ben. I think these kids don't know. A lot of these kids would tell you, I don't know. I don't know what that is. And I think you have to push them sometimes and say, what do you not like? If you get in their head and say, well, if you don't want to do it this way, somebody's got to be able to tell me why not, so that we can figure out what is going to work. And I do that with students all the time. I'm actually first trying to assess, how do they learn? That's one of my first objectives, actually, is kind of get in their head and see not only their goals, but how do they like to process material. And I think kids just don't know. The problem is they're taken through this process, so they just, here's your homework, turn this in. There is a lot of sort of, that type of interaction with teachers and students that there was when I was in school, I should say. Probably evolving.
I think things haven't changed all that much in school in quite a long time, actually, maybe 100 years, give or take.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So, So it sounds like you've had definitely a wide variety of experiences in the blues and in teaching, and I'm wondering just maybe if you could talk about some of your influences again. So I'm going to play a song or two from some of the influences you mentioned, but I'd just like you to talk maybe about more how some of the people that you listened to or worked with have changed the way you think about your craft or think about your learning process in general.
Sounds good.
So could you talk about that for a minute, and I'll cue up the next song?
Sure. I thought you wanted to play the song.
Oh, no. Tell me.
I think the first person that comes to mind for me, so there's a couple people, but one of the first people goes back to when I was a little kid. So for me, huge influencers were, I want to say my first grade year, and then right around my middle school, I want to say in 7th grade, I have standout teachers that what stuck out about these people were that they were so excited about what they were doing, it kind of forced me to engage. So I have teachers, like just straight up teachers, in K through 12 in that time frame where I reference them and I think of them often as people that like really pushed me past what I thought I was capable of. So that was early on. But if we're talking musically and kind of in my adult life, what inspires me the most right now are some of the modern players that are kind of either my age or in my style, and that I feel like I've kind of grown up with some of these people. Let me just name one of the people.
Please do.
Greg Eisor. Yeah, Greg Eisor is a musician out of actually Austin, Texas now. We met in New Orleans back in 2001 to 2003 in that time frame. And we became close friends. He's a great blues harmonica player, and he is a wonderful singer and songwriter. So Greg Eisor, Izor is his last name. So he's been a huge influence. I feel like in a lot of ways he was just the guy that I felt like he was a notch above me when I met him, so I constantly was trying to reach at what he was doing. I was constantly trying to grab a piece of what he had, and he had stuff to show me that I didn't have. So I still follow him and watch his progress and cut me off at any time.
Oh no, that's great stuff. I love hearing all that you have to say about this. Is there a moment that you can think of where he showed you something in a way or gave you a lesson that sort of like clicked and really did something for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I got the example that comes to mind is in the world of harmonica, one of the things you want to learn as a blues harmonica player, and this will sound like crud, I'm on speakerphone, but coming through the airwaves, playing these nice big octaves, which sound like a chord. We're playing 2 notes, and when I was learning to play at that time, I was still figuring things out. I did not understand how to get that on the top of the harmonic, and I remember him showing me one day saying, if you want to learn how to get that sound up top, you got to push that harmonica way in your mouth, open up, and he was giving me the specifics. You guys can't see it now, but... And I was trying to get that big ring out, that big sound to come out, and he helped me get that. And it wasn't until he showed me the right technique and the right approach till I sat down with him that I could actually do that. So there's one example of probably dozens.
Yeah, and that's a powerful thing to have someone who you look up to and who is clearly, in your mind, if you're not in reality, a more knowledgeable other who has skills and success that you would like to emulate. To be able to show you just little things like that can be a huge difference because it gets us to that next level where we can start attempting more challenging tasks and more challenging opportunities that maybe we couldn't have attempted without that little extra skill that we were handed over by someone who knew better.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of osmosis going on too when you're around people that you feel or you perceive are stronger or better or smarter, whatever you want to put on them. It pushes you in a certain way, and I feel like I do have a lot of friends in that category that are people I really look up to. I have a lot of friends in different parts of my life, so it's kind of it just puts me in my place, reminds me that I have so many people that are so unique and special to learn from, and that's what it is, the different attributes. The osmosis part of it for me is music. Like, being around guys like Jerry Hunt out of Chicago. He's one of my best friends and a great musician out of that area. Plays with the Corey Dennison band. Here's a guy I've played with since the late 90s when I first got to Colorado, and he constantly has grown and evolved as a musician and as a professional in the industry, really. So I'm learning from him all the time, musically, on the business side of things. I feel very fortunate to have some of these people as my closest friends around me.
Yeah, absolutely. Our social networks have such a big influence on what we do and what we feel empowered to do. It's a great thing to have those kind of influences. Ronnie, we're gonna take a couple minutes to take care of some station business and play a song from William Clark, one of your big influences, and then we'll come right back and keep talking. We're here at 90.1 KZSU Stanford with Ronnie Shellist, and we are talking about modern education for self-directed learners through the lens of a blues musician. So we're gonna play a song, do a little station business, and come right back.
Every night when I come home, well, a bedroom without a woman, baby, darling, like a heart without a beat. Yes, a bedroom without a woman, sweetheart. Without a beat. Yes, I've been searching this big world over. I got to find the one that's meant for me.
This is 90.1 KZSU. We have KZSU on mobile. When KZSU started broadcasting back in 1947, our low-power radio signal was transmitted from cables strung through Stanford's network of historic steam tunnels. Fortunately, things have improved a lot in the last 70 years, and the latest way to listen to us is on your smartphone, anywhere in the world. Although you have several options, the easiest is to download either the free TuneIn Radio or iHeartRadio apps, both of which are available from iOS and Android. Once you've installed the app of your choice, simply search for KZSU, then click and listen. It's as simple and convenient as that. Look for KZSU on the TuneIn Radio and iHeartRadio apps, and keep the noise you need right there in your pocket. We are on with Ronnie Shellist, who is a blues harmonica player out of Colorado, and I'm bringing Ronnie back in here. We're going to keep talking about education and through the lens of his blues harmonica experience. Ronnie, you there with us?
I am here.
All right. Thanks for hanging on there with us, Ronnie. We're back live on the air. So we just talked a little bit about some of your blues influences and some of your experiences in education. I wanted to touch back on that for a minute. Now, I'm realizing it's probably been a while since you've been in school, which is totally fine. And what I'm curious about is, now that you've had quite a bit of time to separate yourself from education and you've got your degree and you've been working as a musician and entrepreneur for a long time, I'm curious what the lingering impressions of what school had to offer you are now that you're far enough detached from it. Maybe you have that 2020 vision in hindsight.
Oh, man. That's a good one, Ben. I think I may not be the perfect example. I'm 47 years old, just to give anybody listening an idea of, the time frame of when I was going through elementary, middle, and high school. But let me just put out there that I'll say I was diagnosed early, but not told and not revealed to me that I had ADD. And so school for me was a bit of blur. What did school have to offer for me? A lot of hangout time with my girlfriend in the hallways. I definitely, did get through and acquire some core skills. Reading and, language was kind of what I got out of middle and high school, that I was really interested in language. I ended up majoring in Spanish, so it made sense that those were the classes. Anytime we were, involved in even grammar, I was a big grammar freak in school. So that's kind of what stuck with me. Math and science and history, even, I will say, they aren't my strong points, and I know that might disappoint you to hear.
Oh, not at all.
But you know what? And what's interesting is that college, for me, looking back, I wish I would have waited a couple, 3, 4, 5 years to decide if it was right and what to study. I didn't know. I mean, I went with Spanish. That was on my mind, and that was of interest. But I think we need more time from 18 years old when you get out of high school to get a job and have a little bit of life experience to start to figure out what you want to study. But the way it is, most kids, at least when I went to school, you went to college as soon as you graduated. I think that's what kids still do, right? Right as soon as you get out of high school, a lot of kids go to college.
Yeah, the ones who are lucky enough to have that kind of resource, they usually do.
That's right.
And for the ones who don't, sometimes they never get a chance to go back, and others do take some of that time away and come back with a much clearer picture of what it is they want to do when they actually decide to apply themselves to school. So I think that's a very astute observation.
Yeah, I was clueless. I really was, and I wish that I could have squeezed more out of college. College, I got a great appreciation for the arts in general, being in a great city such as Austin, and enjoying some of the educational, interaction on that side too. With my major, I got to read some great, literature, Spanish literature, and I got an appreciation for the culture. So I think that's what my takeaways were from that time frame. And I can tell you this, the process of learning, understanding myself as a learner didn't come into play, and not even while I was self-teaching and learning the harmonica. It happened as I began teaching other people, is when I really understood, understood what I was doing, how I analyzed and processed it myself.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Ronnie. I think that's a really important thing for people, especially classroom teachers and parents, to understand. There is a level of ownership over learning that comes through teaching it that I haven't found any other way to substitute that level of awareness of where you actually stand with a subject.
That's right.
Yeah. It sounds like you've figured that out for yourself, and as many other people who are accomplished in what they're doing have, I think, figured out the same thing, which is why at some point in any kind of professional career, people seem to tend towards starting to teach, to bring up people to replace them, so to speak.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think anybody can really move somebody along to the next level unless they have a couple ingredients. One of them is a mastery of a skill set, an understanding of the material, a high-level understanding. But then you have to understand how you process so that as you're communicating, you have a clear path to communicating what it is you expect and how they're going to get there. And it's based on your own experience. Hopefully, if you're observing what you're doing and you're perceptive enough, you've figured out what those little tiny nuances are that a beginner wouldn't be thinking, even an intermediate player, let's say in my case, blues harmonica player, to get them just this tiny little change in a result. So, yeah, the teacher has to be hyper aware. I'm always telling the student, if you want to get really good, you got to teach yourself. I'm not here to teach you. I show you a whole bunch of things and suggest how to put them in motion. You're doing the teaching. Students are doing the self-teaching. Everything is self-taught, really. Don't you think?
Oh, yeah, I absolutely do. I think no one can force you to learn, so it's really a matter of giving you the opportunities, and then if people take them on, they make them into something maybe that no one's ever seen before, and if they don't, then they're just sort of treading water.
And then getting these kids to be, and anybody, not kids, people, to be inspired enough to actually take action and motivate. And I think that's the other thing lacking in our school systems that I was seeing back in the day, was the lack of enthusiasm from my teachers, from my fellow students, based on either teachers or principals, administrators, whoever was influencing the energy of the environment we're learning in. So instead of being constantly cheery and upbeat, I remember a lot of unhappy faces around me. And what does that do? It makes you down. It makes you kind of scared to be open and open to the process of learning, and feel it didn't make me feel very safe. So I'm always trying to make people feel safe. Number one, I want them to feel safe. I want them to feel comfortable enough to take these chances. And, those are some of the big ingredients that kind of pop into my mind.
Absolutely. It sounds par for the course for anyone who's trying to be a good teacher. So you're on the track that I would endorse, and probably a lot of other teachers would agree with you. Now, I wanted to go back for a second, because you talked a little bit, not just about safety, but about sounded like self-efficacy, that idea of feeling like you're valued, or feeling like you're in a place where you can take risk and like that it's going to lead to something useful. And I'm wondering, maybe even if we maybe shift your lens a little bit, as an entrepreneur, what do you think about the proper attitude is to have in the face of setbacks, in the face of needing to take a risk to get to that next level?
It is the scariest. I've been doing, in the last 3 to 4 years, I've had to go through this process of taking risks that were financial risks, that were potential risks for my reputation, I guess, as a teacher and a player. And I had to take these risks to get to the next level, to see if I could be successful and put myself out there. And I think if you don't do that, you not just become complacent about it, but you're not even aware of what you're capable of. It's like as an entrepreneur, the whole point is that we don't want to fit in a box. At least for me, I failed at everything to figure out that I needed to make my own way, right? So as I look back, the more and more I was willing to put myself out there. And again, sometimes the example was just, I'll tell you an example. I had to, I wanted to do these harmonica retreats in the mountains, and I'm still doing them today. And the risk there was inherent in the cost of, let's say, securing the property, this big giant mountain home with 8 bedrooms in it, and hoping that then you could get some folks to get interested and sign up for your event. These are the types of things you got to put yourself out there with your music too, and it's no different. If a learner doesn't feel safe about putting it out because maybe you're going to share even something simple, like if you're recording, you should say, hey, this is for you and for me. No one else hears it. In fact, I destroy the copies after you get a hold of them. I won't have these. So that way they know it's truly for their process, these recordings. Although I do go back and listen once to learn from what was going on in the lesson from my own perspective, right? Like we talked about.
Right.
I have to go back often and use those files. But people need to feel safe. They need to feel motivated. And you need to give them the steps to take to get there. And I think if you can give a little bit at a time, that's something we haven't talked about, but helping people understand, like, mastering a little bit of something, a little bit of information is very valuable, and a lot more valuable than learning a lot of something through, let's say, a piece of music, and it's kind of halfway. You don't really own it. I'd rather hear you just own the introduction to the song, let's say. So
yeah,
that's something that to consider for the learners out there is mastery one level at a time. Yeah.
It sounds like you're talking about the difference between width and depth when you're learning. You'd rather someone take real depth in a small little piece and really own every nuance and aspect of it, rather than just learn a bunch of songs and not be very great at anything that happens or even understand what's happening.
I think we forget mastery can be so simple. Like, for example, on the harmonica, mastery can be a single note. Great, you were able to produce one single note all by itself. That's a mastery. If you haven't mastered single notes, you should probably spend a whole bunch of time doing that as a beginner before doing more advanced concepts. So it's funny because I think the word scares people. When I say it, sometimes it's like, I really want you to come back and feel like you own it. I say that a lot to students because I want them to feel proud to come back and say, check out what I have. Look what I accomplished. And for me, the first step on my instrument was taking pride in Oh Susanna, and that was my song. So I played it until no one wanted to hear it around me anymore, and and they were proud of me too, and it sounded great, but it was time to learn another song. So it taught me that lesson of sticking with it until you feel like you really are doing something with it, that feels right, that you want to share with somebody. Because if you don't want to share it, I think there could be a piece missing in that process too. Usually when we're learning, we get excited and we want to share our accomplishments. So I look for that in the people I work with as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, I think that's applicable in music, but I think it's applicable everywhere. If you do something and you're proud of it and you've really taken ownership over it, why wouldn't you want to share it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna move on a little bit here. Let's hear one more song. How about that? We're gonna hear one more song from one of your, I'd say, virtual mentors, one of the artists that you told me that you've really enjoyed. And we're gonna come right back in a couple of minutes after that. We're here with Ronnie Shellist, and we're talking about informal learning in the context of a blues harmonica.
You ain't got no kind of feeling inside, girl. I've got something that will show no set your stuff on fire, girl. You refuse to put anything before your pride, baby. What I got to give will knock your pride aside. Get out! Tell me something good. known to say. I'll make you wish there were 48 hours in each day. Problem is you ain't been loved like you should, babe. What I got to give will shall not go your girl. Tell me something good. Come on, yeah. Tell me that you love me, yeah. Come on. Tell me something good. I want to tell me that you like it, yeah.
Okay, we have the San Francisco Symphony for Brahms. The San Francisco Symphony presents Brahms' Dramatic Symphony No. 1, along with the works of Shostakovich and Esa-Pekka Salonen in 3 performances, March 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in San Francisco's Davies Symphony Hall. For tickets, call 415-864-6000. That's 415-864-6000, or visit sfsymphony.org for these March 1st through March 3rd performances of Brahms Symphony No. 1 and the beautiful Shostakovich Violin Concert No. 2. KZSU has the KZSU Day of Noise. KZSU presents our 16th Day of Noise live for 24 hours starting Friday, February 9th at midnight and continuing through the early hours and all day until midnight on Saturday, February 10th. You'll hear a variety of live, improvised, experimental music, drone, noise, ambient, free jazz, power electronics, and more. KZSU's Day of Noise stands as a tribute to the liberation of sound from the rules of conventional music. Tune in starting at midnight on Friday, February 9th, only on KZSU, and follow the live video stream as well online. So we are here. We have our guest, Ronnie Shellist, is calling into the studio today from Colorado. And Ronnie, you back there with us?
Yes, how are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for hanging out there for a few minutes while we took care of some station business. So, Ronnie, I'm going to hit you with a couple of more questions here, and then we're going to play out a couple of your songs before we end the segment. So, first, actually, Ronnie, I think you're coming to the Bay Area soon. Can you give us a quick plug for that, where people can find tickets and that kind of thing?
I sure can. Thanks for reminding me. I'm going to be headed to Morgan Hill, so I'm doing a harmonica workshop out there. If it's something you want to check out and learn more about, you can just... Am I allowed to say my website?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you head to harmonica123.com, you can find all the details on that website. It's all listed under the workshop area. You can just look for workshops, and you'll find out about this event happening in California.
Awesome. Well, I hope some people get to go check you out. I think there's going to be a concert afterwards, so if people are interested in checking that out, they can do that as well. If they're not a player or looking for classes, they can also just come enjoy some of your music. So I think that'd be a great opportunity if people are interested. We also, okay, so I have a quote here for you from Buddy Guy, and I was hoping you might be able to just talk a little bit about your thoughts here. Buddy Guy said that the most important thing he can do is keep the blues alive. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, I think the most obvious interpretation from that, to me, is just that, it's a dying art form, quite frankly. It is. If you look back at the amount of popularity and the amount of artists that were playing from the early years to now, so looking back from, let's say, the 40s and 50s and the heydays, coming all the way out to now, it is a dying art form. So I think that's part of what he means. The best thing I can do is keep it alive, but there's something else bigger than it. I'm sure that for Buddy it's spiritual, and I think a lot of this is just a very sort of important journey that he's taking in his life, and he hopes that other people will take that similar journey. And I think for me as an artist, it means to pass on the positive things that we take from our music and be able to instill that to a future generation of people that can benefit from it. Not only can they benefit, but all the people that they come in contact with that you'll never meet, those people are going to be hopefully affected in a really positive way from it. So I think that's some of what he means by it, but hey, I'm not Buddy Guy.
Hey, fair enough. Nobody but Buddy Guy is, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I got another question here for you. Thinking about the history of blues, and I'm sure you have at least some familiarity with the history of blues, but as the blues has come about and really matured, it has a long history of benefiting the record labels, and maybe to go as far as to say the white people who've promoted it, and not necessarily the artists, the African Americans and the natives that have really been the innovators in the bringing this form of music around. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts about the implications of that history regarding your own career and interest in the music.
To be honest, I try not to think about it too much. I do think that it was that's a very real thing, obviously, that happened, that a lot of African American artists were taken advantage of, right, by these guys that would record them and then sell their tracks, and they'd pay these guys next to nothing. So in case somebody's never heard of that happening, that happened all the time. And some of the songs went on to be hits. So should it, I don't think about it. I think it's a horrible thing that happened, and I just try to educate people as to how important, really what matters to me out of that is taking the history of African Americans and what they gave to this music, the blues, and promoting and celebrating the music itself, and hopes that we will not repeat that. I mean, that's a real big concern. It's not a concern in my world directly. That's the interesting part, not just because I'm a white guy, but I think because I make my money in all these different ways. I'm not just relying on an artist. If we look at if you look online now, I mean, you can't make all the dilemma of digital music and how people are, not able to make a dime through Spotify or whatever the challenges are out there, through modern internet technology. But, I'm not a full-time musician. It'd be a really good question for guys that rely full-time, I think, also, and think about the guys that just make their living only playing music, and then to have somebody take advantage of them that way. That's kind of the ultimate burn. So
yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. It's a really good question. I wish I had a better answer.
Oh, that's okay. I thought it was a tough one too, but it's interesting to think about, and I think it's always nice for the audience to think and hear that we do think about these kinds of things, and it's an important aspect of what's going on behind the scenes.
Well, here's one thing for everyone. One of the lessons that people can take today is just protection in general. When you create something that's a creative piece of music, let's say in this case, protect yourself, take the steps necessary we have those in place. Back then, I don't think all those laws were in place, but now there are ways to protect yourself. And it's sad that we do live in this world where people still take advantage of all sorts of people of all types, and that's just the nature of some of what's out there. There's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think you have a nice level-headed view of that. So, Ronnie, we just have a few minutes left here, so I think what I'll do is I'll just thank you and let you get on with your day, and then we're going to play a couple of your songs to finish up the hour. So, again, this is Ronnie Shellist calling in from Colorado, and Ronnie has tons of videos on YouTube. You can check him out. He's got about 9 million views or more at this point. He has a few CDs that you can look at if you're interested in hearing some more of his music, which we will play momentarily. And Ronnie, any final thoughts you want to share with the audience before we say goodbye?
No, I get happy learning to everybody. I hope that whatever you're learning in your life right now, it's something that's really captivating you and that's pushing you to constantly evolve. I hope that's what's happening.
I think that's a great set of final thoughts, Ronnie. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing your opinions and your ideas with us, and thanks for all your great music.
All right, thank you. Appreciate you having me.
All right, thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
you going? What's your name? I think I love you, baby. Ain't that a crime to say? I love the way that you move as you pass on by. I love the way that you shake your hips. I can't deny. Won't you tell me my